doing is starting the recording and transcription for today's learning event. Thank you so much, everybody, for logging on. My name is Corinne Chidley, and I am the Learning and Development Coordinator from Shropshire Safeguarding Community Partnership. We've kept everybody's cameras off because this is a recording event, and you will be able to see the presenters that are presenting this morning. We have got the chat function, which if you want any questions answered, please use that chat function. And if we can't answer your question, we will get back to you. But we'll obviously do our very, very best. So it's important that you can see the screen throughout. It will change often. And if yours gets stuck for whatever reason, please log out and log back in. I've taken the lobby function off so that you'll be able to join us. So you should all see a blue background, some netiquette. So this is about thanking you for joining us. We're up to 208 people now. And the most important thing is that you've prioritised this 2-hour learning event. So please ensure that you've turned your emails off and you're not doing other work. We're talking about professional practices here that review after review conducted in Shropshire highlight that there are vast improvements to be made within being professionally curious. So the content really does deserve your full attention. So please be here now with us for the next 2 hours. We're recording this event so that you can revisit parts of it, and so that it will be available to colleagues who have been unable to attend, so that you can participate fully. Every single time we ask a question, your answers are going to remain anonymous, and we're going to use a platform called Mentimeter. Which will become clear as we go through. There's four opportunities during the 2 hours to contribute. So that's the anonymous feedback. So the outline of this morning is to look at the case reviews and learning briefings from Shropshire, to listen to a person's story, to hear about a practitioner's experience, to look at an evidence-based tool, to really unpick those barriers to professional curiosity, and also some tips for starting very difficult conversations and what's next. So that will all be brought to life in the next 2 hours. So for those of you who haven't come across a Padlet before, all the resources from today will be in a Padlet, and you will be emailed a link, or you can look at the Padlet now if you want by getting your phone and scanning that QR code, and you'll see what the Padlet is all about. Lisa, I think, has already put the Padlet link into the chat. So handouts 1A and 1B, they have got local links to local information, links to videos and podcasts on handout 1A. On handout 1B, there's national links there for you to look at, and we're referring to them. So throughout this learning event, you'll see a little note, and you can see the little note in the top right-hand side of your screen, which highlights where on the Padlet you can find the information that we're referring to. And so I will keep that Padlet updated after the event. So let's look at published learning briefings, and throughout this event, any images, oh, what's happened there? Images and any names used do not identify any persons or any places, and that's really, really important to us. So the first thing that I'm going to ask you to do, and this is completely anonymous feedback for all 270 of you, you can either scan the QR code on the screen, or you can follow the link that Lisa's just popped in the chat, and it will give you 6 options, and you can choose one option or multiple options, and your answers are completely anonymous. So at this moment, before we presented anything, what do you think are the barriers that prevent professional curiosity? So please scan the QR code or follow the hyperlink. So thank you. I can see I've had 90 responses so far.
So rather than popping your answers in the chat, can you follow the link in the chat that I've put in, or use the QR code on the screen, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We've had 170 responses.
Can I please ask people to mute their microphones as well, please, if they're not one of the presenters? A little bit of feedback. Thank you.
So Mentimeter is working for most people. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to share this on the screen, and you will be reassured of your anonymity. But if we just look at that, we've got 229 responses. And we have got a proportion of professionals who don't have any barriers, and they know that they are professionally curious. And hopefully today will be reassuring for you. We have got people who recognise that time pressures affect being professionally curious, that there are too many other things to do, that they recognise that they haven't built a good enough relationship with the person, whether that's a child, an adult or a family. We've got people who recognise they feel burnt out, which is really important. And actually, we've got some people who they don't actually know what being professionally curious means. And we put that option because what we tend to do is know about a phrase and use it without actually checking in. Do people know exactly what we mean by that? So from the 243 responses, we really appreciate your feedback. Thank you. So let's first have a look at published learning briefings. So this learning briefing, you can find it on handout A. It's to child F. So just a little bit about child F. This little 9-month-old baby lived in a caravan with the parents, and I'm going to call the baby Farron. That is a gender neutral name. So both parents were known to be involved in drug use and related crime. Farron's father had got several associates who posed a real risk. There were safeguarding concerns reported, and when the police went into the caravan where the family lived, there was an open tub of baby formula was found next to cocaine on the table. And there were weapons and broken glass on the floor and surfaces that Farron could easily get to. But when we look specifically at the professional curiosity bit here, what we find out is that Farron had been seen with a parent, but was seen in the house of a relative, and it was not the house where Farron lived, where they ate, where they slept, where they were spending most of their time. So The message there is about being professionally curious when undertaking home visits, and I thought it was important to give a little bit of detail around that. So that is a child in Shropshire. So the next one that I wanted to really flag up to you is the learning briefing for Mr. M. And this is the learning briefing for Mr. M is 2 pages. And there's not time enough to for us to go over every point, but you will find the learning briefing on handout 1A. But what I did want to do is look at these 2 points. Point number 11, I've highlighted professional curiosity, and I've highlighted Think Family. Now, when we're looking at Think Family, first we need to have a shared understanding of what family means, because it's different things to different people. Who did Mr. M count as his family? Who did the person you're talking to, who do they count as their family? It may be that it includes close friends or extended family members who they trust, and this might change. And that's okay, because relationships are not static. In Mr. M's case, talking to those who Mr. M and his wife counted as their family could have given real valuable insight and information into their circumstances. And I think, thinking widely, neither adults or children exist in isolation, and Think Family promotes how important it is to take a whole family approach. And this means identifying wider family needs which extend beyond the individual that's being supported. And this approach helps to ensure better outcomes for adults, children and families by the support and delivery of all services from services from all the organisations. So when we look at the next slide, when we're talking about learning briefings, some of you may know about them, some of you may not. We're talking about published learning briefings that are written about children or adults or families that live in Shropshire. We're talking about children, babies, teenagers, 19-year-old adults, adults in their 30s or 70s that have died or have been subjected to significant harm in horrendous circumstances. So we're talking about somebody's child, someone's parent, someone's friend, someone's neighbour. I'm not going to apologise for showing the faces of children and adults, and sometimes when we only receive written facts, we can disassociate from the upsetting and abusive circumstances that we're reading about. So all these learning briefings, that we can learn lessons from the horrendous circumstances that that children and adults have been abused in or have actually died in, they are all can be found on handout 1A. And I'm just going to ask you to do another Mentimeter. I'm just going to ask Lisa to pop in the chat. So you can either scan that QR code or follow the link in the chat. Now, there are 8 options now. 8 options. So what I'd like you to do is choose one or more, and please be reassured that your feedback is completely anonymous. It's another multi-choice. Okay, your answers are coming in. That's fantastic. I've got answers here from 194, 204, 206. Just leave it for another second. So I think we've still got some answers coming in, but I will share it on the screen for you. So what does professional curiosity mean to you? So you saw all the answers, you saw all the questions, and these are the answers. Thank you. So being nosy, interesting that is only 48 of you. Interesting, we'll come to that in a minute. Noticing when something isn't quite right, asking those difficult questions, asking more questions to get more detail. Uncovering information that might not be clear, not taking things at face value, triangulating from other people. And triangulating information means that you'll check this information out from multiple sources to understand what's really going on. And fantastic that people recognise that their own values may affect how they look at things. So, thank you for doing that. Good to know. So, you might have noticed that we changed the title. We changed the title from just being professionally curious to professional curiosity, otherwise known as private investigation in safeguarding and community safety. And simply put, private investigation is uncovering information and facts which are not always clear. And many of you chose that option. We could also refer to being professionally curious as respectful nosiness. Not just being nosy, but respectful nosiness, respectful uncertainty, healthy skepticism, or being interested to ask the right questions when we need to notice something isn't quite right, and then ask more questions to get more details. And asking why questions are really good for that. So it's so important to leave no stone unturned. Keeping positive relationships is so important. Sharing your concerns and sense checking to find out if something makes sense to other colleagues, to look, listen, and questions, and reflect. Think about your own values too, and how these might change the way that you look at a situation, and collaborate and confirm who else do you need to talk to or talk through your concerns with. It's really important to think the unthinkable and believe the unbelievable. It's better to be wrong than to miss something. It's hard to think that someone might be abused or an abuser. And a paradox is a situation or statement that seems impossible or difficult to understand because it contains two opposite facts or characteristics. If we look at the paradox of abuse, for example, abusers can seem lovely, rational people, and those that are abused can defend the abuser, love them, and say they're happy. But if we don't think the unthinkable and believe the unbelievable, how can we safeguard and do the right thing and consider how you articulate your intuition into an evidence professional view? Discuss those gut feelings that you've got with other professionals. So these are some small examples that we are going to carry on unpicking through this. But when we say be courageous and ask difficult questions, that's being part of being professionally curious. Ask open and direct questions, which in the example shown give some information on the left-hand side when we might be talking to a child's parents, or on the right-hand example when we're talking directly to an adult. So that's giving them the information first and then asking that open but direct question: can you tell me what happened? Okay, so there's another short example. On the left-hand side for children, on the right-hand side when you're talking to an adult, recognizing that they've changed, that they've been really quiet and tired and said they haven't slept. So finding out what might be going on. So we've got Kaylin's behaviour, all gender neutral names throughout, noticing that behaviour has changed dramatically. And then on the left-hand side, talking to children, the right-hand side, talking to adults. And when you get the recording, you can, sit and reflect on some of these as well. And so the last example, just really upfront, I need to talk to you. Can you tell me about it? And we're going to be looking and unpicking the barriers to professional curiosity and looking at tips. So before we introduce the person's story, I'm just going to ask you to consider what keeps you awake at night. You don't have to tell us. This is for you to reflect on. Just think about it and keep a note of what keeps you awake at night, and just think at what point, if you were working in any capacity with these people, it would be stopping you from sleeping and keeping you awake. Just have a think about it. So what I'd like to do is introduce Gemma Jones, whose job it is to manage the housing support team, who support those in temporary accommodation who are at risk of homelessness. So welcome, Gemma, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Hi everyone. My name's Gemma and I am Housing Support Coordinator, managing the housing support team in temporary accommodation across Shropshire. The person I'm going to talk to you about is called Ari. They are in their 50s and have been a resident of Shropshire all their lives. In the circumstances I'm going to tell you about, Ari could be male, female, a mother, a father, or single person with no children. Between 2017 and 2019, Ari had no fixed abode and had been sofa surfing and paying for B&Bs, bed and breakfasts for themselves, possibly with inheritance money after the death of their parents, or from doing small gardening jobs. I'm really not sure. In 2019, Ari spent time in hospital due to their diabetes. This resulted in them having all of their toes amputated on one foot. After the operation, a couple of weeks later, they were discharged from hospital. On hospital discharge, due to no fixed abode, Ari became known to Housing Options. Housing Options offer support and help when adults or families are at risk of homelessness. And at this time in their life, Ari had no family or friends to turn to for support. As a result, Ari was placed in temporary accommodation in a bed and breakfast. In March 2020, with COVID, all of a sudden, under government guidelines, Housing Options had a duty to get everybody in. Everyone needed to be safe with the ability to isolate. As a service, we were overwhelmed. For every individual that is in temporary accommodation, we have to be working on their homeless case. This meant we had to fact find and gather information to see whether Shropshire Council had a statutory duty to continue to house Ari in temporary accommodation while they secured their own home. In May 2021, I became manager of the housing support team. While looking at everyone's caseloads, one individual in the team said they were the only one who could visit Ari. Why? The support officer said, because Ari is classed as no loan working, and I'm the only one that can handle no loan working cases. What they were saying was that they considered that they were the only one that could deal with Ari despite the no loan working risk assessment. This didn't sit comfortably with me, and I recognised things needed to change. I was curious. This made me delve into Ari's case to find out why they were classed as a no loan working tenant. Reading their case, it was due to their aggressive behaviour towards one member of the housing support team, and this resulted in Ari being issued with quite a few warning letters. These letters stated, "This is a formal warning regarding your behaviour as you were verbally abusive and aggressive towards your housing support officer." They also informed Ari that they needed to complete a housing benefit form. Otherwise, Ari would owe money for the accommodation we had provided, and this would create rent arrears for Ari. They also reminded Ari to engage with the housing support officer. Despite the warning letter, Ari continued to disengage with the housing support officer, refused to get a bank account despite not having any access to money. Despite several attempts by myself to work together with the housing support officer, they simply didn't change their approach to meet Ari's needs, which I recognised placed even more of a barrier for Ari. The housing officer visited Ari and tried to complete a housing benefits form and get ID, but Ari continued to be verbally abusive, continued to call them names and refused to work with them. Ari would simply shut the door in their faces and tell them to go away. As a result, another final warning letter was sent. Housing Options were on high alert where Ari was concerned. It was agreed all future visits would require 2 members of the support team and the no loan working policy would be followed. In October 21, a few months into my role as manager, the housing officer who knew Ari left. At this point, all I really knew about Ari is that they were an angry person who previously had no fixed abode. They were living on their own, in a bed and breakfast, in the middle of nowhere, isolated, no friends, no family, and had no access to money. On top of this, I knew they had been in hospital with diabetes and had a major operation on their foot. And as a service, at this point, I recognised we were failing Ari. I had so many unanswered questions. No one is angry for no reason, and no one is going to refuse money or a bank account without reason. What was Ari's mental health like? And how was their foot? How are they managing to survive? And what are they eating? How are they keeping themselves clean and tidy? In fact, how did they keep themselves clean and tidy? They must have been absolutely beside themselves. I wasn't concerned that Ari had been abusive. I was concerned as to why, because there must have been more to it. In my mind, I was thinking Ari must be feeling isolated, lacked trust, feeling unsupported and lost. Mostly, they must be feeling scared about their health and their future. During COVID and lockdown, although Shropshire Council had paid for the B&Bs in full, unfortunately, I recognised that Ari had been neglected, living in a quiet and isolated rural area in Shropshire and had no recourse to any money. I looked at Ari's records and found that they had actually been in temporary accommodation for 20 months without getting any intense housing support and, to our knowledge, no social care support. No one should be rejected from getting support because they've been angry for a moment. Let's take a moment to dissect how Ari might have been feeling and thinking at that time. I personally made joint visits to Ari with Frankie, who was a new member of the team. I wanted us both to get a feel of Ari's personal needs. We all wore masks as Ari was very conscientious about following COVID rules and was terrified of catching COVID. In our first meeting, Ari was really lovely, could talk for England and presented as being quite timid. I wanted Ari to feel safe and secure in our presence and to know that we could be trusted. Ari explained the operation on their foot and, as a result, still saw the doctor on a regular basis. We talked with Ari and discussed the benefits of moving to another bed and breakfast temporary accommodation for a change of environment and the structured support we could offer. At this point, Ari was undecided about this idea. I think we were with Ari for about 2 hours that day, just getting to know everything about them. We found out they had lived with their parents in a town in Shropshire until they both died. Ari didn't want to move back to that town because of the memories and a previous bad relationship. Ari liked living in a quieter, peaceful place because they did small gardening jobs to earn cash and liked a quiet, peaceful life. Reading between the lines, it wasn't that Ari didn't have or want any money or a bank account. I recognised they just wanted to disconnect from the world And the reason that people normally disconnect is due to trauma. For Ari, it was about loss, pain, lack of control, and bereavement. We explained that the main barrier of getting their own home was affordability. As Ari didn't have any money or a bank account, there was no evidence that Ari would be able to afford their own home. Ari was entitled to claim benefits, including backdated benefits, which I reassured we would support with. At this point, Ari understood and actually showed interest in getting a bank account and additional access to money. The decision was made with Ari to move them to another B&B, which was temporary accommodation in a different area of Shropshire. Unfortunately, following this move, there were complaints from the community about Ari's behaviour as they were rummaging through the neighbours' bins. Temporary accommodation were going to issue another warning letter, and I was like, no, 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 no. I immediately stopped the warning letter. A warning letter wasn't going to stop Ari. It was going to cause them more anger, stress, and anxiety and push them away. I wanted to look into the reasons why Angry might be doing this. I knew at the time the B&Bs were providing one meal a day. So we spoke to Ari about the complaints and rummaging through bins. Ari admitted it straight away, but also said that they didn't like all the tinned food that the food bank gave them, and they didn't have any money to buy more food. So I said, okay, fair enough, I'm hearing you. I understand you need to control your diabetes. But then I asked, how would you feel about being able to buy your own shower products and your own food, whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted, instead of relying on food banks and other people's leftovers? And with that, you also wouldn't be getting into trouble or losing your temporary accommodation. If that happens, you might be sleeping on the streets. If you let us, we can help you. Over the next few months, Ari worked very closely with Frankie every week. They applied for benefits and opened up a bank account. They opened up a post office account, and on the back of that, Frankie supported Ari in opening a bank account, and Ari was absolutely over the moon with the independence that this gave. Ari was able to buy a phone, which helped them to communicate with Frankie to arrange visits. Their mental health was getting better, and Ari was very engaging. They would keep us informed of their health and their doctor's appointments. Ari was lovely and sweet and really appreciating the support. So during this time, we saw no threatening behaviour at all, and I'd stopped making the joint visits with Frankie. In October 22, Frankie spoke to Ari about the potential opportunity to move into a permanent home in an independent living accommodation, where there would have been on-call support if needed. It was in the town Ari had grown up in. Ari was reluctant to even talk about this and stopped answering the phone. I know that change can be overwhelming for anybody, and I recognise Ari's mental health might be fluctuating, so Frankie and I arranged a joint visit. The problem was that Ari didn't want a joint visit. They only wanted to see Ari. They only wanted to see Frankie, sorry. On this visit, we were sitting outside the B&B. Due to the change in uncertainty, Ari's mental health was through the roof. They knew they couldn't stay in temporary accommodation at the B&B, but they really didn't want to move either. Ari's personal health had declined and their foot was causing pain. During this visit, Ari was very frustrated and angry. As we hadn't listened to their request for only Frankie to attend the meeting, Ari shouted aggressively, saying that they were not able to mentally handle the appointment, that they were too unwell. I explained and said, well, to be honest, the fact that you are so angry and feel so unwell is the reason why we needed to make sure that there was two of us because of your mental health. Frankie needed support from me so we could figure out the best way to support you. We're both here and are both going to listen to you. And we did. We talked and explained that the independent living accommodation was in a different area of the town where Ari grew up. There were local doctors, shops, and the hospital was close by, and there was a hairdresser's and a cafe on site. But Ari's mind was made up. They weren't interested. Ari kept on repeating, "You're not listening to me. My mental health can't handle this. Who do you think you are? You know my foot is in pain. You don't understand. What do you want me to do? Just run across the road and just kill myself because I will?" Then Ari was saying, "Look, just look what I have to deal with." Ari took off their trainer, took off their sock, and basically lifted their foot up in the air and showed us a very bloody, gross, half-wrapped, dirty bandage, blood, gunk, skin flying in the air from Ari's foot everywhere. Ari's foot was really swollen. It became clear that Ari had been living with an open wound for over 2 years where they had all 5 toes amputated and had not disclosed this with us. I can never unsee the image of Ari's foot, and there is no image that could show how awful Ari's foot looked. After asking them to put their trainer back on, Ari started walking towards the really busy road, waving their crutch in the air. I spoke to Frankie about this being a possible safeguarding concern and whether to call the police or not. But do we call the police? Do we think the police presence would aggravate the situation even more? We encouraged Ari to get off the road and come back and sit down. I said, "Right, your behaviour is not okay. And if you think you're okay and you're fine, then that is a concern. This is a safeguarding concern, and we are questioning your mental capacity on whether you're understanding your behaviours. Okay, so it's your choice. You either call the mental health team and you get crisis support immediately and take yourself to A&E because of your foot, but also if you don't, I will." And this is the reason why I was not allowing Frankie to conduct this appointment and manage this situation on their own. That's the reason why I'm here. For your behaviour right now, you need support and you need help for your mental and physical health. And right this second, that is our priority. Your independent living housing appointment is in 2 days' time. Ari just wouldn't listen, but also wouldn't allow us to end the visit. Ari was angry and was going over and over the same things. I even said, "There's nothing else that we need to say. You need to digest everything and then message Frankie later." But Ari still went on for about another 30 minutes. When we left, we were both overwhelmed by what had happened, and Frankie was unsure what to do. And I said, "Right, so think about Ari. They are overwhelmed with emotions. There's potential change with a potential move. Ari is exasperated, stressed, and anxious. Ari is feeling overwhelmed because of the pain caused by their foot and not knowing what's going to happen in the future. Just give Ari a breather and see where they're at tomorrow. If they've done nothing by tomorrow, then we have a phone call with the safeguarding team." The next morning, Ari called Frankie to apologise and acknowledged the fact there needed to be 2 of us and said it was a good thing. Ari said they had actually called the mental health team themselves, spoken to the doctors, and made an appointment. Other professionals advised me to be careful due to Ari's aggressive behaviour, but for me, actions speak louder than words, and Ari was not aggressive towards us at all. Ari was aggressive towards the lack of control over their situation. I did not agree with their professional views. We also didn't issue a warning letter. I don't think a warning letter would have helped with what we needed to achieve in this situation. In the phone call, Ari agreed to look at the independent living accommodation, agreed a time and date, and organised their own transport. Following the visit, Ari absolutely loved it and really wanted to go there. It was a community where they felt safe and surrounded by other people of a similar age, away from youngsters, drugs and addiction or anger issues, which felt overwhelming and threatening while in temporary accommodation. Unfortunately, like many others, Ari couldn't afford to live in the independent living accommodation and was deeply disappointed, but understood. After the independent living accommodation failed to progress, it gave Ari the confidence and oomph to move forward and get their own permanent place. Ari was attending the doctors more, who advised Ari needed to go to hospital, but Ari didn't share this information with us. They kept saying that they were fine. Regular tenancy support was in place with Frankie, which Ari engaged well with. They would place bids on housing association properties, do welfare checks, and looked into additional benefits which Ari could claim. Ari was then offered another property that was literally around the corner from their childhood family home with all the memories. We thought Ari wouldn't accept, but they did, and began the sign-up process, which has lots of stages. Normally, the day someone signs up for their own tenancy is the first day someone sees their new home and the day they have to leave temporary accommodation. Due to Ari's mental health and their foot, I recognised that Ari would need more support and time. So I requested a visit to the property before sign up. That was agreed, and I knew this would help Ari's mental health and get them mentally and physically prepared. Then on the day of sign up, that's when the house move could happen. Ari appreciated the additional time and knew when they had to sign up. Ari also needed medical support for their foot, but Ari was reluctant. And Frankie, bless her, actually said, if you don't get support for your foot by tomorrow, I will, because there is no way you can continue and move on and move forward with your foot being like that. Frankie checked on Ari the day after sign up, and Ari was in hospital. I advised Frankie to go and see Ari in hospital. I recognised that it was important to continue our support during this transitional period, because if no one had given support, rent and utility bills would have been left, and Ari would still be in hospital not knowing what was going on. Ari was being stubborn and refusing to take on medical advice. Medical professionals were saying they needed to amputate to the ankle. Ari's reply was, I'm not having it, I don't want it, I don't need it, nope, I'm not having it, nope, not for me, thank you. Ari really appreciated the support being offered by Frankie. Ari was very, very engaged and grateful. Frankie moved all of Ari's belongings from the B&Bs to their new home and made sure that all their benefits and utility bills were in place. I asked Frankie to visit the hospital again to give Ari an update and see how they were. Surprisingly, on visit, Ari said, do you know what? The doctors have explained everything to me and I understand, and I'm now having my leg amputated to the knee. And do you know what? I think it's for the best for me. I've got support from adult services, support from mental health, rehabilitation support for me to walk and get me back on my foot when I get better. They will have carers in place for me too. And thank you, because when I'm ready to go home, at least I know I have a home to go to. Ari said Frankie was a completely different person from their first visit. From being isolated, hostile, and refusing to work with the housing support team and being on high alert due to anger issues, to where we were now 18 months later. Ari was discharged from hospital after a successful operation and moved into their own permanent home with mental health and adult social care workers and rehabilitation in place. Helping Ari to identify their own barriers, own fears, and to give them the confidence, self-belief, and strength to move forward. By not giving up, being persistent, patient, and asking questions, Ari got the support and the home that they needed, wanted, and deserved. That was due to working together as a team, where we all identified Ari as an individual and as a real person with a story to tell which needed understanding. Half of the team are missing in this photo, but I just want to say how amazing the housing support team are at identifying barriers, delving into cases and going above and beyond to support those who have been hit rock bottom. And I'm really proud to lead such an awesome team who understand the strength of professional curiosity. Team, thank you.
Gemma, thank you so much for bringing Ari's story to life and giving us so many examples of when you and your team were professionally curious. And thank you for that. I could see some questions coming into the chat when you were talking. So I wondered whether you could just have a look at the chat and reply to anything that needs replying to. Be grateful. And, you know, to hear about your team and how persistent you've been and patient, you know, all that is on the screen, being interested, being genuine, doing with and not to someone, you know, having that balance of being professional, having empathy, you know, building that relationship and being honest, all that you've just thank you. It's been really great to work with you, and I know that you have got numerous examples like this, but I'm really grateful for the time that you've spent, you know, really bringing that one person's story to life. Thank you. So what I'd like to do now is look at difficult conversations, because part of being professionally curious is holding those difficult conversations. And we know from the case reviews, from the learning that we have to do, that these difficult conversations sometimes aren't happening for numerous, well, they're often not happening, but for numerous reasons. It's challenging to have these difficult conversations when disagreements need to be tackled, challenging to deal with hostility. Raising concerns can be a challenge, and giving information to people who really won't want to hear it, that won't be well received, that is all difficult. And all these conversations are recognised as being really hard to have. So what we've got in Shropshire is a neglect screening tool, which contains questions which are designed to help you to have those difficult conversations with parents, whether you've only just started working with them or whether you've been supporting them for some time. It's very important that they understand that this tool is supportive and enables collaborative work to happen with them. And it's a document which identifies and discusses areas of concern, and the overarching objective is to improve the individual families' lived experiences and outcomes. So it's important to recognise that when single people become couples of different or the same sex, some of them may become parents. We also know that some grandparents have parental responsibility, and some couples may stay together, some may not. However, what we do know is that when people become parents, it's rare that they wake up in the morning and make a conscious decision to make choices which are not in their own or their children's best interests. We've adapted this screening tool to be used with adults who neglect themselves, and this will be launched within the next few months with the updated self-neglect guidance. Until that's available, the questions in this screening tool can be used as a basis to support adults who don't have children. So the neglect screening tool, has got 21 questions that are designed to identify and discuss areas of concern with parents where there are early signs of child neglect. However, the areas of questioning that the tool suggests can be used as a basis to support adults without children too. It's just about how those questions are posed. Always remember that the aim is to improve the child, their families, or an adult's lived experiences. So I am going to ask Julie Duncan, who is Early Help Workforce Development Officer for Children's Services, to pose some questions in this next session. To post some questions in this next section.
Thanks, Corey.
No problem. I'd also like to introduce Lisa, who is representing Jax today. Jax, unfortunately, after spending extensive time planning this section for several weeks, couldn't actually be with us this morning. So she really wanted this section to go ahead, and so Lisa has stepped in. So Jax is a practitioner who's been working for 6 years with families in Shropshire School. And Jax has been using the neglect screening tool since it was launched in 2020, and is going to share how she uses it.
Right, so first of all, we're going to think about consent. We know that everything is much more transparent when we're upfront with people about our concerns. So, Lisa, can you give us an example about how to ask for consent?
Yeah, so Jack said that every family is different, but she finds that if she uses the word consent too much, it becomes like panic sets in with the families. It's like a rude word. So parents are thinking it must be bad if consent's needed. It seems like there's a lot of angst around that word for everybody. Jax works with the mantra, how would I like someone to say it to me? How would I like to receive that information? Jax has a relationship with the families where she's able to switch between being serious and using banter and humour where it's needed. Even though they discuss serious topics, she wants the families want somebody with some warmth, a little bit of empathy, and a little bit of consideration. So not too formal. There needs to be, you know, that warmth and humility. And Jax is human, and people know that she's human. So she's not going to go into somebody's house and go, right, I need you to sign this consent form for me. She starts, you know, she started a conversation recently with the family to see, saying, you know, I need to see where we can help, and I need to see where I can help you. And there are some questions in this screening tool that I'm going to use, and we can have conversations around the different sections. So I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to be dead up front with you. Sometimes things might not, you know, might get worse before they get better, just like, you know, when you go to the doctors or when you go to counselling, but we'll get through it together. The first thing that parents say about consent is why do you want it? Why do you need it? What are you going to do with it? And who's going to see it? Jax uses humour, as I said, in her work with families. She says, "Okay, I'm good, but I'm not that good, you know, and sometimes I might need some help, you know, while I'm working with you. So I might need to get somebody else on board to help to support us with, you know, some of the sleep routines or the debt. You know, if you're in debt, we might need to get somebody else on board to help with that. And whoever's helping, they'll work alongside me and you just to make sure that we're meeting all of your needs." Jax doesn't always go into everybody's houses in the roles that she's in. But when she does, she's sort of noticing those little things as she's going in. She will ask questions, and as she's sort of, you know, going in, she's already noticing things within the home. You know, she's noticing what it looks like, you know, how it might smell. And she needs to be careful. She talks about her body language and not letting her face do the speaking for her. And she doesn't go straight into a conversation about consent. You know, she'll start with that human conversation first. You know, she'll speak to the dog, say hiya, you know, what's the dog's name, and she'll talk about the weather and that sort of thing to sort of break down some of those barriers first off.
Thanks, Lisa. And I know that you've got some information about a visit where Jax has spoken to the whole family situation, but can you give us an example today about how Jax has opened conversations around home conditions on a home visit?
Yeah, so Jax mainly gets parents to come to the school, but when she does carry out a home visit, she already knows what the main issues are. So she will have an agenda in her head, if you like, before she goes, so she knows what it is that she wants to cover. She'll start by saying, you know, that I'm here to help. So that's really important, you know, to sort of start with that. And it's important that she doesn't tell them what it is that needs improving, but that she opens the conversation about what it is that they think might need to be improved. You know, if the outside space is an issue, she's not going to say, oh gosh, you know, your garden's a bit of a mess, isn't it? She might say, okay, let's look at the garden. What do you think needs to happen so that you can use it a bit more? You know, there might be an old fridge, or it might be completely overgrown. There might be a lot of dog poo out there. So she would ask, you know, what needs to happen so that the kids can use the outdoor space, you know, more safely. She might say, you know, use her own garden, for example, and say, you know, let them know that she understands that it's difficult to sort of keep on top of. And it's about having that discussion and listening to them and letting them know that she's here to help them.
Thanks, Lisa. Now, we know that the screening tool covers lots of different areas of potential concern, but if we look specifically at question 19, have you got an example that Jax has given you of when parenting may be compromised by one or more of those factors listed here?
Yeah, so Jax was recently in a situation where she'd had a phone call from a social worker to say that a family was being stepped down for her to work with. She had prepared for a meeting because it was going to be potentially quite awkward, and she wanted to make sure that she felt she was, you know, she wasn't getting nowhere with the situation. So she needed to talk to the parent about how much alcohol they were drinking, without making that parent feel like they were under scrutiny or being really criticised. And it was about humanising the situation and making it relevant. So Jax started the conversation by saying, you know, the thing is, when I drink, I'm terrible. You know, if I have a little glass of wine, I'm asleep for hours. I cannot take my drink. I'll be completely honest. I just can't. So she was sharing a little bit of herself and said that after a glass of wine, you know, she was asleep on the sofa, and this made the parent, who I'll call Riley, laugh. And Jax then said to Riley, you know, in terms of you, you know, how much, you know, can you drink? You know, what about you? You know, how does drink affect you? Riley said, you know, I can drink 3 bottles of Prosecco and it doesn't affect me at all. And then Jax, can you have that conversation around, can you still honestly stand up after 3 bottles? And she, you know, have that conversation around, that's, you know, that's a lot of alcohol to be able to consume. And Jax is then able to have an open and honest conversation about capacity in an emergency. So Jax was able to say that when her husband's on shift, you know, she doesn't drink at all because, God forbid, if something happens to, you know, to one of the children, she knows she wouldn't be able to take them to hospital and drive the car because, you know, of the impact the alcohol will have had, and explains that that's what capacity means. And then she poses the question to Riley, you know, you say that you can stand up after having that alcohol, but you know, can you absolutely say that you know, well, you absolutely cannot say that you'd be able to look after your children and you know, be able to take them to hospital if anything happened to them. So there's being able to hold 3 bottles of Prosecco, and there's a distinct difference between being able to do that and have the capacity to care for your children under those circumstances. And Jack said, you know, I'm not the wine police, I'm not the beer police, I'm here to chat to you about your lifestyle choices. You could drink as much as you wanted if you hadn't got to care for your children. And the issue has been that you have been noted to be heavily under the influence whilst in the care of your children. And, you know, Jack says, I need to make sure that you're aware that the harsh reality, if this continues to happen, and that's the last thing that we want. And Jax is then able to ask Riley why she thinks she drinks. And you know, Riley's then able to be, you know, have that conversation about what it is that she thinks is behind her drinking, and Riley talks about needing or wanting to drink because it helps her to relax. Jax was then able to have a conversation around other things that might be able to help Riley relax. Riley did talk about liking to read. Jax talked to Riley about a book she'd recently finished. Riley actually went out and bought that book and really enjoyed it. So then in future conversations, they talked a little bit more about different books and things. And Jax knows that that's not a quick fix. It wasn't, you know, and there's a lot more work to do. But she's opened that conversation with Riley and began a connection with her, and was able to open the door to quite a difficult conversation with her about her alcohol consumption.
Thanks, Lisa. Now, the last area I'm going to focus on is to think about question 9, which is around seeking medical advice appropriately. And has Jax given you any idea of any situations where she's faced this that you could share with us?
Yeah, so Jax had a family she was working with who had quite poor school attendance, and the children seemed to continuously have head lice. There are rules about head lice in school and notifying parents. So she doesn't just phone up the parent and say, your child's got head lice. She says it in a certain way. She starts by saying, hi, Rory. It's just to let you know that there's head lice around the class again. I wondered if you could just check Drew's hair to make sure it's okay, and then if you could treat them, that would be smashing. Any problems, then let me know. And then she would log the call that she's made. Then, you know, if Drew comes back in with head lice again, because Jax has already spoken to Rory, she'd phone them again, because there's the same issue, and it's becoming a recurring problem. So she'd make another call and log that again. And if that continues and there's no change, then she'd ask Rory to come in and meet with the school. You know, she's plans for the parent coming in, so she'd print off a sheet about head lice, you know, a help sheet, so that it doesn't look like she's implying dirtiness or anything. And she is avoiding, you know, the parents sort of saying stuff you, if you like, you know, and often she has situations where the parent says, you know, the child's allergic to everything that you buy in the chemist, and we've tried everything. So she has, you know, she gets things up on Google, and the parent will often say, you know, we've tried that. So the parent, Jax will say to the parent that in that case, you know, you need to go and speak to the GP, which often the parent hasn't. So if they haven't, then Jax will say you need to go to the GP. If not, I will make a referral to the school nurse. And Jax also makes the parent aware about making sure that the bedding is cleaned as well.
So it seems to me that in all of these circumstances, this screening tool is used as a live document with Jax. So she's reviewing it with parents to see what they've accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely. So she goes through them, you know, bit by bit, and checks off, you know, what they read through the actions that have been completed, you know, and updates them and discharges the actions that have been completed. She gives praise when they've been completed, and if parents start to digress away from an action, then she brings them back, you know, and says, you know, this is an area that really needs to be worked on now, so that they can move on.
Thanks for giving us those examples. I mean, it sounds like Jax has really had some difficult conversations. I'm not sure if there's anything else you'd like to add just to finish it off.
Just that Jax said that she, you know, firsthand knows what it's like working with challenging and vulnerable families. And that's, you know, there are times when it can feel really overwhelming, even a bit scary and totally exhausting. So it's a bit like your own personal relationships. You know, these families have their good days and their bad days, but what's important is that they know that you're in it with them. So they might not agree with everything you say or that you do, but they know that you've got their back, and that they know that your intentions are good. So Jax did talk about remembering that there was one tricky family that she was working with where she was going to have to ring social services, but before she made that call, she advised the mum that was what she was going to be doing. The mum was silent and then replied, you know, at least you've had the decency to say this to my face. It was a really tricky case. But as she signed them off, the mum actually emailed her and said, you know, I was lucky to have you in my corner, Jax. And that was priceless for her. Jax thinks that maybe the most important part of her job is waiting patiently in the corners until somebody needs her.
Thank you so much, Julie and Lisa, for bringing that to life for Jax, and I'm sure that she'll be happy with how you've done her experiences justice. So thank you for that. I wonder, Julie, whether we could go on to the next section. So you're going to talk about the Wonicot's discrepancy matrix, which is an evidence-based tool which helps practitioners think critically about the information on which they're basing their decision making. So over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Corinne. Yeah, this tool was developed by Jane Wonicott, and it really encourages practitioners to think about what they know about what's going on and decide what's unknown or not yet known. I think this is a vital aspect of working with uncertainty. It supports the practitioners to tease out the information they hold into 4 types: firm ground, ambiguous, assumption, and missing information, and helps them think critically about the information. It's quite a simple process. Like all of the best tools, it's not overly complex. So the first process is, of course, to start with the story. We need to think about that experience. What is it that the story is telling us? And then sort the information. Once the information's sorted, that gives us then the opportunity to stop and reflect, thinking about maybe what's changed, what we still need to know, what this might mean for the adult or child, and what the next steps are. So we're going to go through the matrix step by step. So we're going to start at the top right-hand quadrant, which is ambiguous. What does this mean? This means information that's not really properly understood. It perhaps is just hearsay. It might have more than one meaning depending on context, or it might be hinted at by others, but not really clarified or owned by anybody. Then moving on to the bottom right quadrant, we need to think about what we don't know. What's missing? The practitioner needs to reflect and acknowledge that there might be gaps in the information they have, and they need to look at these gaps to see if anything that's missing might really have a bearing on their decision making in this case, because if so, that really does need to be explored. So moving on to the bottom left quadrant, this supports us to challenge assumptions. It allows us to think about our own practice wisdom and our own prejudices to see how this might be informing what we're thinking about the case. Emotions and values can also be explored in this area, and a really self-aware practitioner can explore how they're responding and reacting to what potentially may be some risk. Finally, we're going to move on to the top left-hand quadrant, and that looks at what is certain. What do I actually know? For something to go into this category, it needs to be proven and verified. In other words, it needs to come from more than one source as a fact. It also includes things like knowledge about legal frameworks or our roles and responsibilities, as well as what we know from research. And when we're thinking about making decisions, this category provides the strongest factual evidence for analysis and decision making. So that's the tool. We're now going to work through it using a short example about a young person named Jordan and their family. This is Jordan. Jordan's 12 years old. Jordan has 2 siblings. Rio's only 18 months old and Jay's 11. Jordan lives with mum and stepdad. Mum doesn't work, says stepdad's a casual mechanic. School says they've heard that Jordan's stepdad can be dangerous. Jordan has a new phone. John's been heard bragging about making money selling stuff. And the primary school has shared some information with the secondary school about Jay's needs as part of the upcoming transition. So let's have a look at this information step by step. There's several ambiguous statements there, areas where we may not be sure if they're true or what this might mean to the family. So Jordan's been heard bragging about. Mum's been heard saying stepdad's a casual mechanic, and we know that some information's been shared, but we don't really know anything about it. So moving on to the next stage, we now need to think about what is it that we don't yet know. And it's always really important to think about all the important people in a person's life. Think family. So don't overlook anybody that might be important and think about how they might fit together with this, but also don't discount possible everyday explanations as well. So moving on to the third quadrant, this is what we do. This is what assumptions we might be making, either ourselves or others, and thinking about, is there any evidence to support this? So in this case, we've been told that Jordan's stepdad's dangerous. But again, this at the moment isn't really fact, it's assumption led. And finally, we're looking at those factual statements. We know that Jordan's 12. We know there are two siblings and that their ages are 18 months and 11 years. We know that they live with stepdad and mum, and that they've got a new phone, and that mum doesn't work. So if we put the whole picture together, that information now has been categorised quite quickly and allows us then to think about how we move forward. Thinking about what has changed about what we think we possibly know, what we possibly still need to know. What does this actually mean for the adult and child? And what do we think we need to do next? So we're going to ask some more questions which could bring up two very different scenarios. So we'll start with the first one. Those questions could lead to, actually, these are signs of exploitation. That this is a family with a mum and a stepdad, and that dad has no contact with them, leaving Jordan asking questions about who their dad is. A new phone, but no explanation of where this has come from. That they're actually selling things and questioning what that might be. That their 11-year-old sibling has got some additional needs, and there's a toddler that is a step sibling in the house as well, adding to the stresses. But conversely, our questions could also bring out some positives. It could be that what we've got is a happy stay-at-home mom with a stepdad who actually isn't a casual mechanic but owns their own garage. That mom and dad are working together to co-parent even though they're no longer together, and that Jordan got a new phone for their 12th birthday. In school, they might have been doing something around entrepreneurship, and so that when they're celebrating, selling things at school and making money, this is actually really positive. So we can see that by working out where things sit and asking more questions, it really helps us tease out what is really, really going on for a family and what life's like for them. Thank you.
And you can see in the handout, thank you, Julie, so much for that. And in the handout, what we've got is the links to give you more information about this discrepancy matrix. And you brought it to life in a way that's really transferable for when we're working with children and their families, or when we're working with adults. And so thank you for that. So what we're going to look at now is tips for starting difficult conversations and unpicking those very real barriers to professional curiosity.
So yes, so we've heard from Gemma and we've heard Jax's story, and I think they both demonstrated for us how important planning is. Planning in advance helps us to ensure that there'll be time to talk about what needs to be talked about. Thinking about when to hold the meeting, thinking about how you are feeling as a practitioner. Are you stressed? Are you rushed? Have you been in back-to-back meetings? Holding an agenda in your mind and focusing on those topics that you know need to be discussed. Thinking family, whether this is adults or children, who is their network of support around them? Think about the people in the house, but also those wider support networks. And remember that trying to see people separately helps us to think about whether they are subject to any controlling or coercive behaviours. And I think, again, both Gemma and Jax, through their stories, demonstrated congruence. Lovely word. What does it mean? It means that when our body language and what is said is consistent with the tone of voice used, being aware that some questions are sensitive and these might be difficult or potentially triggering for the person we're talking to hear and discuss. Jax gave us examples how she can be non-confrontational, how she tries not to apportion blame, sticks to the facts and uses humour. I think another thing that's really important is to be prepared to sound like a broken record. It's really important for sustainable change that families and adults are empowered to own their issues and solutions, and that support is framed in a way that they can relate to. We want the best for you. We want the best for your family. Or we want the best for your children. We know you do too. Comments like that are really, really hard for people to disagree with. So we also need to be mindful because we can't always predict what an individual is going to, how they're going to respond or what their concerns may be. And we also need to think about when we're working with whether it's children, adults or families, how difficult it is for them to sometimes have these conversations. Because often the person wants nothing more than for us to hear them and be present in that moment. They don't necessarily want us to solve their problems in the here and now.
So, confidence in managing tension is a real barrier to being professionally curious. So, when there's disagreement, disruption, and aggression from other family members, could be co-workers, other professionals in other agencies, that can really undermine confidence and divert from the issues and the problems that you as practitioners need to explore. So when we look at professional deference, now workers who have most contact with the child, adult or family are usually in a really good position to recognise when the risks are escalating. However, sometimes there can be a tendency to defer to the opinion of a higher status professional who has limited contact with the person, but who views the risks as less significant. And what we heard Gemma talk about was the absolute opposite of professional deference. And it was an example of professional challenge and how to manage tension. So be confident in your own judgment and always outline your observations and concerns to other professionals. Be courageous and challenge their opinion of risk if it varies from your own. Without professional curiosity, the outcome for Ari could have been very different.
Another barrier to professional curiosity is thinking about normalisation. Normalisation refers to those social processes through which ideas and actions can come to be seen as normal. Then they become taken for granted or just natural in everyday life. Because of this, we might not then question them, so they're not recognised or even assessed as potential risks. Questioning why is the opposite of normalisation. When Ari was going through the bins, by asking why, not seeing this as normal behaviour, that was crucial to understanding what was going on, as was challenging Ari when they threatened to run into a busy road, rather than just accepting that Ari makes threats and yeah, that's just how they are.
Another barrier to being professionally curious is confirmation bias. And another way of describing bias is prejudice or unfair treatment. And this could be because of a person's characteristics: ageism, homophobia, transphobia, racism, Islamophobia. And it happens when we look for evidence that supports or confirms our pre-held views, and information is ignored that doesn't support our views. Examples are when we filter out potentially useful facts and opinion that don't match our own ideas, and we fall into fake news traps. When we agree with information on social media, for example, because it fits what we want to believe, we don't dig deeper. We receive it as the truth and not the fake news that it is. We saw the exact opposite of confirmation bias, where Gemma, as a senior manager, was objective and considered the evidence and arguments without bias. Gemma didn't know Ari and professionally challenged the worker, changed the way support was offered, and got to know Ari as a person by visiting them, looking, listening, and asking those important questions.
And I think one of the things we need to remember is that very often in our professional lives, we will be dealing with uncertainty, most days, in fact, where we might have opposite accounts of the same situation. We might get disclosures given to us which are vague or are then withdrawn or changed. We know that medical evidence, for example, can be inconclusive, and sometimes we can even face deception. Practitioners are often faced with concerns which are impossible to substantiate, to prove if they're true. And in these situations, there can be a real temptation to discount those concerns that cannot be proved. We need to have the courage and focus on the needs of the service users, remembering to always think family. When dealing with uncertainty, a person-centered approach requires practitioners to keep in mind both the original concern and to remain professionally curious. Unsubstantiated concerns, inconclusive medical evidence shouldn't lead us to close that person's case without further assessment. Retracted allegations still need investigation wherever possible. Using risk assessment tools can help reduce that uncertainty, but they're no substitute for our professional judgment. Results need to be collated with observations and with other sources of information included. To really understand the situation, practitioners from every agency need to have the confidence to help triangulate information from others. That could be family members, it could be people within the community, it could be colleagues, it could be people from a different discipline. And this is particularly important where there are differing accounts.
So, disguised compliance can be a real barrier to professional curiosity. And what is it? It's when a family member or a carer might give the appearance of cooperating with whoever's working with them, and that avoids raising any suspicions. It allays those professional concerns, and ultimately it reduces the professional's involvement. Well, we need to establish the facts and gather evidence about what is actually happening. And it's really important to consider that no matter what you're presented with in that moment, the best predictor of the future that we have is what's happened in the past. So it's important to understand the complexities of disguised compliance. You may find adults focusing on just one particular issue that's gone well to deflect that attention away from any other areas. Adults will often blame someone else, including other professionals, for things not happening. Again, deflecting attention away from the things that they have not done. And the intention is to create a divide within the professional group who are working with the adult or family. And you really see that those adults are not taking responsibility, not being accountable for what has or happens to somebody else. It's always somebody else's fault. So adults will promise to take up services offered, but then not take the children or other adults to appointments. And there's always going to be a problem, always. They're always going to say there's a problem. Maybe adults will agree to certain targets and then avoid further contact with professionals. So it's professional curiosity. Disguised compliance can be seen as a pattern over time. you don't feel it in that moment very often. But it's really important to be cautious. Consider if by the lack of change, is it disguised compliance, or does it reflect a really difficult relationship between the adult and the professionals? Sometimes, as professionals, as practitioners, we can too readily describe the adult as demonstrating disguised compliance when actually they just don't want to engage with that professional. And in these circumstances, and it's really difficult to tell the difference sometimes, but professionals may need to really reflect on how they can establish a better relationship.
Another barrier is that sense of knowing but not knowing. So having that sense that something's not right, but not really being able to put your finger on it, not knowing exactly what it is. So it's really difficult to grasp that problem and take action. So sometimes we need to trust our intuition and have that difficult conversation, because we all know we've got good gut feelings, and there is a reason that we have these. You know, most of us, we've lived with somebody, we've known somebody who's hiding something. It might be to do with their health, it might be to do with them having an affair or drinking or drug taking, possibly to do with debts or hiding the fact that they've lost their job. And we often know that something's wrong, but we can't put our finger on the problem. We heard about this when we heard Gemma tell us about Ari and their circumstances. So we do need to trust our intuition, but we also need to be aware that we can't follow it blindly. So we're hoping to get to the bottom of it, but we might not be able to. We have to try. People who keep secrets, they're very, very good at keeping them. We've got to remember that abusers don't stand there shouting, "Hey, look at me, I'm an abuser." But similarly, people who are being abused don't stand there either saying, "Hey, look at me, I'm being abused." In fact, they may not even be sure of this themselves.
So, one of the barriers is recognising when there's accumulating risk and seeing the whole picture. So, reviews repeatedly demonstrate that professionals tend to respond to each situation or new risk on its own, rather than seeing the whole picture, rather than assessing the new information within the context of the whole person or family and looking at the cumulative effect, which is the increasing risk in a series of incidents and information. This includes understanding the elements and indicators of behavioural change. And Gemma and her team were more concerned as to why Ari was abusive than Ari's actual aggression. Recognising that Ari must have been feeling so scared about their health and their future.
Another thing that we need to be wary of is the rule of optimism. We know that most people who choose to work in any of the caring professions have a natural tendency to see the good in people and in circumstances. And it's important we don't lose this important attribute. But we need to recognise this is a frame of mind that can sometimes lead us into unthinkingly taking a positive view about families or adults, when really we shouldn't be doing this. This rule of optimism is a well-known dynamic in which professionals can tend to rationalise away any new or escalating risks, despite any clear evidence to the contrary. We need to make sure that as risks present or escalate, we take these seriously. Otherwise, significant concerns may be risks, and both children and adults that need protecting will remain unprotected.
So what we need to do is have empathy and walk in the shoes of the person to consider the situation from their lived experience. And we saw Gemma do this right throughout, telling us about Ari. We need to show empathy and consideration and compassion and be real and honest. But there is a problem, because a barrier to professional curiosity is burnout. And we cannot show empathy and walk in, understand the lived experience of the person when we do have burnout. So let's look at the possible causes of job burnout: professional fatigue, compassion fatigue, working in toxic work environments. And we'd like to think that that doesn't happen anymore, but unfortunately, we know that it does. Work-related stress. Us thinking, well, we can't make a difference, so what's the point in even trying? Professional hopelessness. When we've got a lack of control over our work and decision making. There might be really dysfunctional workplace dynamics, which is a little bit different to toxic work environments, but actually when we're in the middle of it, it doesn't feel any different. And it's really hard sometimes with people in the professionals, the professions that you're in, to get a good work-life balance. And so what are the consequences of that? So emotional and physical exhaustion, being irritable, being impatient, being cynical, feeling disillusioned, insomnia, not being able to sleep, having headaches, being vulnerable to illness after illness, feeling detached, and on top of this, having a really heavy workload, long hours, feeling effective, and feeling that you haven't really accomplished anything and you've been working your socks off. So what is really important is to recognise your own limitations and reflect on the impact, evaluate your options, and discuss specific concerns with a supervisor. But we know not everybody will have a supervisor. Maybe you can work together to change expectations or reach compromises or solutions with a team member, ideally with a supervisor, but with a team member or colleague. Try to set goals for what must get done and actually what can actually wait, and explore those professional boundaries with families and adults. It's really important that we can ask for help to a colleague, a friend, family, or our doctors. Whether you reach out to those co-workers, friends, or loved ones, the support and collaboration might help you cope, and take advantage of other relevant services as well, like counselling programs. Explore programs that help you relax, that can help with stress, such as yoga, meditation, or even Tai Chi. Get some exercise if you can. Regular physical activity can help you to better deal with the stress, and it can also help take your mind off work. And it's really important to do whatever we can, whatever research is available to us, to explore how we can get more sleep and more quality sleep. Because what we know, it's not so easy to do, but what we know is when we sleep, it restores our well-being and helps to protect our health. And the last one I'm going to talk about is mindfulness. Mindfulness is the act of focusing on your breath flow and being intensely aware of what you're sensing and feeling at every moment without interpretation or judgment. And in a workplace setting, this practice involves facing situations with openness and patience and without judgment. Julie, Lisa, or Gemma, do you want to add anything at this stage?
Yes, just to say that I've put a link in the chat to Palouse Mindfulness, which is an 8-week free mindfulness course that people can use.
Thank you, that's really helpful. And what I will do is add it to the Padlet. Now, if you're in an organisation, we know our NHS colleagues have difficulty in accessing the Padlet. What we will do is anybody with an NHS address, what we will do is email you the all the handouts separately. And if anybody else is in another service that cannot access the Padlet, do let us know and we will make sure that you have things separately. Once you've got that Padlet, you can download anything you like off it. So just wanted to let you know. And so I'm just going to pass over to Julie.
So it's time to get your opinions again. We've got another Mentimeter coming up for you. Lisa, are you okay to drop this into the chat? Oh, you've done it, you superstar. So please follow the link or scan the QR code. Now there's 8 options here and we would like you to choose just one, please. How are we looking, Corinne? How many have come in so far?
70.
70. Give you a few more.
98. 100.
Oh.
144. 190. 'Slow down now, Julie.
Oh, are you okay to show us? Thank you. So where we're seeing people get their support from is by far the majority is peer support in my place of work, which is really positive. About half that number of people have chosen supervision. Other people are choosing multi-agency professional conversations, but perhaps outside a place of work. And we have got small percentages of people who either are Googling it, don't know where to get it, can't find it, just feel they don't need it. But a small but nonetheless significant proportion of people who are getting their support from their partners and family members. So that's a really interesting picture to see. Thank you, Corinne. And I know somebody's just dropped in the chat, I would have chosen multiple options as people do get support from more than one area. Absolutely. We do acknowledge this, but it's just really interesting to see how many people can get their support professionally.
Thank you, Julie. And there are lots of links in handout 1A and 1B that will give you ideas of where to get some support from. So these are some takeaway messages. So we need everyone to understand the barriers to professional curiosity and be courageous and ask difficult questions. And this means looking and listening and asking those direct questions, checking out and reflecting on the information that you're receiving, not taking a single source of information and believing it without thinking much about it, even so. Think family. Neither adults or children exist in isolation, and Think Family promotes how important it is to take a whole family approach. And this means identifying wider family needs which extend beyond the individual that's been supported. Be prepared to have more than one conversation. Think how many conversations there were with Ari. Think how many times Jax has those conversations when working with families. What's The first time you talk about any sort of abuse or any sort of situation, the person might communicate very little. And what's important is that you've actually started that connection, you've started that relationship, you've started. Be prepared to revisit that conversation at a later date, and then you might get more information. Work collaboratively. Share information and communicate with colleagues within your own and other agencies. And what is really, really important for professionals, practitioners, right across the workforce is attending multidisciplinary meetings. So be that person who works collaboratively and attends those multidisciplinary meetings. And if you arrange a meeting and other professionals don't attend, then you need to escalate your concerns. And there's the escalation policy link is in the handouts, handout 1A. Just some more takeaway messages here. Maintaining healthy skepticism or critical thinking means being curious. It means we're hungry to learn about the objective truth, not the truth that is comfortable and easy to believe in, but the truth that's independent of those individual biases. And maintaining a healthy skepticism also means being humble. It means that we're ready to embrace the truth when it comes out, even if we have to acknowledge that we were wrong, we might have been ignorant, and we need to change our minds. It's a good thing. Maintaining healthy skepticism focuses on how to think rather than what to know. It's less about accumulating information as much as possible and more about how to process that information that we have. In life, we will all face new situations, experiences, and challenges, sometimes on a daily basis. And to navigate them, how we think matters more than what we actually know. And that last one, be prepared to think the unthinkable and believe the unbelievable. Now, this is the first and last question that we're going to ask you that is an open-ended question where we are asking you for your thoughts. And you can give more than one example. So we're going to give you a little bit of time to share your thoughts. As always, it is anonymous. But what are you taking away from this 2-hour learning event on professional curiosity? And you can say anything that is relevant to you. Lisa's put the link in the chat, or you can scan the QR code. So we've got 160 responses so far. I'll just give you a minute more. $185 responses so far. I'm just going to give you a little bit more time and then we will share these. It's important that we take the time to look at them. So, Julie, Lisa, Gemma, if anyone, while we're looking at these, if you'd like to comment, there's a lot of people. So we've got 192 comments with 232 responses. I like this. You're allowed to be nosy. Being nosy is sometimes good. It's respectful nosiness, isn't it? It's not dismissing it.
Professionally nosy.
Professionally nosy, yeah, it's okay. We've got people who are taking away the fact that they're more confident in having those difficult conversations.
Mm.
And recognizing that not knowing can feel scary when you are new.
I think it can feel scary at any time.
It can. I was just going to say that, absolutely. Professional curiosity, it's complex, it's multifaceted, and be courageous in your practice. And people have found the barriers section really quite helpful.
Time.
And there's people that already knew a lot of the information, which is good to know. But what's reassuring is that you know, their opinion is for people who are new to the role, perhaps would find this really beneficial. So the leave no stone unturned. It's always fascinating that we can have a group of people and people take different things away, which is why we want to know truly and honestly, what are you taking away? And then leaving no stone unturned. Don't take it at face value. If we don't ask, who will? Quite right. That's really powerful.
I think there's a really nice one there. We actually do a good job and ask the right questions. And I think we often forget to tell ourselves that collectively, don't we? That we do a good job. So thank you to whoever wrote that.
And the importance of planning, isn't it? And taking the time to think to how to form those right questions and to think outside of the box. And we've got people who are really reflecting on their practice and thinking about how they might approach a situation differently compared to how they've done it previously, based on the behavior of who they're dealing with. It's a constant changing environment, isn't it? Because adults, children, families, they are all so different, and we have to approach them in a way that makes sense to them. The discrepancy matrix has been a really good tool, Julie, which is good to know when you brought that to life. And people have liked the real live experiences from Gemma and Jax, which is really good to know. We're incredibly grateful for both of them. The time it's taken.
I think it's fair to say that Gemma's story has probably been the highlight of the session. Thank you, Gemma.
Thank you.
The need to keep digging away, to be honest, not to jump to conclusions or assumptions, and be kind to yourself to avoid burnout. Exactly right. Be kind to yourself. And when Jack said she couldn't come, the first thing we all said was, it's about you. Look after yourself. Look after yourself.
And she has sent me a message to say that she hopes it's gone well.
It's also not expecting you to have all the answers and actually being part of a team to actually ask the questions amongst yourselves as well to find resolution. And I think when you have a caseload, you feel really paranoid. You feel like it's all on your shoulders and you're expected to find all the answers yourself, but it's not. It's about a team.
Thank you. So to ask those difficult questions responsibly, but still ask them. People are going to continue to try and do their best. And actually, what more can we ask?
Yeah.
Do your best. If you do your best, that's all we can ask. And it's really good as a line manager that's logged in that Wonecott's discrepancy matrix was new, and it improved reflection of professional reference and considering normalization. So that is really good to hear.
Yeah, one of the things about using those tools is it really helps you to show your workings out, for want of a better word.
Yeah, it's important, isn't it? Think beyond the initial patient, think family.
Oh, I like to be humble, slow down reactions or ideas and think through collaboratively as well.
Yeah.
It's really important, that humble one, be it having some humility is so important. I have worked with people years ago now, thankfully, who always wanted to be right, could never be wrong, whatever the consequences were. That is just scary. We've got to be able to say, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. I thought of that wrong. I'm thinking of it differently. It's so important. Look at that, Gemma. Fantastic work from housing. And I literally could tell you,
I
Gemma,
can't say, oh yeah.
Yep, there it is. There it is. New ways of thinking, approaching these types of conversation, and to look through the neglect screening tool for support. It's a fantastic tool.
Yeah, really useful.
Really helps with those difficult conversations, whoever you're working with. Look at that. Be wary of being optimistic to the point of missing things. People aren't angry and disengaged for no reason, and often there is a trauma basis. We have to try and understand that, be trauma informed, try and understand that, look past the presenting behaviours, whether it's adult or the family or a child. What is going on? People do not behave like that for no reason.
Behaviour is a language. They're trying to communicate something.
Absolutely.
They just haven't got the words.
Yeah, absolutely.
And somebody who knows they're correct in asking searching questions, and they're going to continue to do so. Thank goodness. And those searching questions are really quite uncomfortable or potentially uncomfortable. And we've just got to get over it to do the right thing.
I love that one also. Always looking beyond the behaviour.
It's, oh, look, there's more.
Oh, there's more. Yeah.
No, there's more.
I have the line to itself. Right,
yeah.
asking questions. Think the unthinkable and the curious. Share your thoughts and with someone. Look after yourself. Yeah.
Run things past colleagues. Colleagues are so supportive.
But you can be kind and curious.
Yeah.
The two aren't mutually exclusive. That's lovely.
Yeah, kind and curious. Like that. Made people think, which is really good, and lots to consider as well, which is really good. Don't be afraid to ask the difficult questions. And what being professional and curious actually means. We've unpicked it. It was important to us that we did unpick it, and how to apply it not only with adults but also with children. So a lot of people are professionally curious already, but actually when they're saying, oh, be professionally curious, what does that mean? And that's what our aim was, to really break it down. Practically look at the bigger picture, always looking beyond that behavior. It's so important. What a fantastic takeaway. Trust in your intuition, your gut feeling. It's there for a reason. And somebody's going to speak to their manager about their capacity. Have that conversation. And, you know, raising concerns with managers and senior leaders. It's really important. To maintain person-centered practice while still ensuring professional curiosity is being used. Don't be lured into that false sense of security by an individual or family. We're looking at that disguised compliance. And the biggest barriers remaining to be the lack of time and the lack of hours you've got, and the capacity to maintain that curiosity. They certainly are biggest barriers.
I'd also just like to say thank you to everybody who's putting comments in the chat as well.
Thank you. It's really difficult to plan an event with so many people and to get your thoughts, but thank you for sharing that. Okay, so what I am going to do is put these results in the Padlet. So all of the questions that have been asked, all of the comments, they will all be there. Looking at the whole picture, somebody really loves the question, what keeps you awake at night? I'll be using it. It's really powerful, isn't it? Be honest and open with families about concerns and triangulate that information. So we put quite a bit of time aside to look at that. Think family. Fantastic responses.
Yeah.
Be congruent. The way you explained that, Julie, because sometimes, you know, congruent isn't a word that trips off the tongue, is it? What does it actually mean? And you explained it so well. Thank you. The matrix is really important.
Somebody hadn't considered how their own well-being might actually have an impact, which I think is, we very often don't think about looking after ourselves. So I think that's really important.
That's good. So with the child-focused information, hopefully you have taken some important messages from this, but it's really important as a Shropshire Safeguarding Community Partnership that everything that we share can be relatable and translated into working with adults, children and whole families. Getting past the anger, really important. Okay, so with 1 minute to go, we will finish on the very last slide with the safeguarding concerns. And I wonder whether you could put the link to Padlet just once more, Lisa, in the chat. And thank you so much for giving 2 hours of your time away. You will be getting an email with the resources. And thank you for all your interaction this morning. And at 12 o'clock, you are very welcome to log off.
And thank you for all your hard work, Corinne.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.